Hey friends, welcome back. I'm Elizabeth and this is Reading Riley, and as I'm sure you know by now because you just clicked on the thumbnail, we're doing a review of CJ Tudor's The Burning Girls today. I just want to say right off the bat I really loved this book, and I am growing and gaining more and more of an appreciation for CJ Tudor with every book of hers that I read. I've read at this point The Chalkman and The Other People by her and liked them both. The Chalkman specifically probably more so, but this book is right on that same level, and I appreciated it so much and I wanted to share that with you guys. So just give you some of my thoughts about this book. I'll try not to be too wordy, but I've got a lot of scattered thoughts about the book, the story, the discussions, the author, everything in general, so bear with me if you can. This book is called The Burning Girls, and it came out in February of this year, of 2021. And it's her latest release as of now. So to give you a general idea of what this book is about, we're following Jack Brooks and her daughter Flo. Jack is an unconventional vicar in the sense that she is a female. So we have a lot of talk about kind of defying stereotypes and about female subversion and religion in general, but also race issues. There's a lot going on here, and a lot of depth to this book. Sorry, there's a little tiny lizard crawling at my window and I'm distracted. But anyway, Jack and Flo move to this tiny village of Chapelcroft, which is in the countryside of England. CJ Tudor is an English author, so this book is set in England, and they move here to get a fresh start after some unfortunate circumstances happen in her old parish where unfortunately a young girl ends up dead. So they're trying to get this fresh start. They move to this town, but this town has a very distinct, rich, and definitive and disturbing history. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history about this town. 500 years ago, during the reign of Queen Mary I, also known as Bloody Mary, who is a real person in history. I don't know how you Europeans can keep up with your history. She reigned in the 1500s. Like, how can you even go back that far? It is insane, but that is beside the point. Queen Mary wanted to bring back Roman Catholicism after a rise in Protestantism during the reign of her predecessors. And she was so intent on doing this that she burned Protestants at the stake. So that is real life history. In the history of this novel, of this town, 8 Protestants were burned at the stake in this town in the 1500s during the reign of Queen Mary. And 2 of those people were very, very young girls. It is said in this town that those 2 girls, the spirits of those 2 girls, show up from time to time. And if you see them, then you are in imminent danger. In order to keep these girls away, they have developed this tradition of building little stick figures, a lot of sticks, literal sticks, into the shape of girls, and burning them. And hence you have the Burning Girls. It is said that if you do that, it's almost like an offering to these girls, and it's kind of like Blair Witchy in a sense, and it's supposed to keep them away. So we have this set of circumstances. Then 30 years ago in the same town, 2 young teenage girls also went missing. To this day, nobody knows where they went, what happened to them. It's just a mystery. And then most recently, the vicar who worked at the parish in this town before Jack has just died by suicide. So Jack and Flo get to this town and they start to meet the people that live there. They start to hear about these disturbing past stories and all of these things that have happened, and Jack is intrigued. Also, when she gets there, she's given a mysterious gift in the form of an exorcism kit. And it has this like really creepy note on it with, I think it's like a Bible verse. It says, "But there is nothing covered up that will not be revealed, and nothing hidden that will not be known." So she's like, okay, what's going on? So she starts to investigate this, and she gets in over her head, unintentionally endangers herself and her daughter. So that's the kind of general gist of this story. I buddy read this book with Colleen over at Little Ghost Creations. We had so much fun reading this together. Colleen is amazing. If you guys haven't heard of her, please go check out her channel. I will post her channel up here. I'll put it down below. below. She reads mostly horror books, and she's just a really genuine, great, intelligent, and caring, kind person. And she's one of those booktubers that I have so much, what's the word? I have so much faith in her, which is apt for this conversation. I trust her. I trust her. If she gives me a recommendation, she says this book is good, I'm gonna read it. We don't have the exact same opinions about everything, but for the most part, we do have similar tastes. And so I just think she's great. I think you can trust her as well, so go check her out. She has given me 3 questions to discuss about this. Non-spoiler questions. This entire video is gonna be non-spoilery, so I'm not gonna give anything away. If you're interested in reading this book, you can watch this entire video and not be spoiled, so just heads up there. Yeah, so she gave me 3 questions to answer. I'll answer those at the end of my review. I've also given her questions to answer as well, so I'm sure at some point she will be posting that on her channel if you want to check that out. Let's discuss CJ Tudor's writing, because I think she has a really interesting writing style, and not interesting, but distinct and iconic writing style. I really do think her writing style is iconic. It is elegantly written and poised and so well thought out and cared for. You can just tell that she has so much passion for her writing and that she puts so much love into her words. If CJ Tudor's craft was cooking, I think she would cook soul food, because you just feel that passion, you feel that love that goes into everything that she writes. I'm just so impressed by her as an author and as a writer in general. She tends to write multiple points of view and multiple timelines, and she misdirects the reader in a way that is so clever and so smart. And she will insert these red herrings, but you don't even know they're red herrings until it clicks when it comes back around. Everything comes full circle. She has a very distinct eye for detail, and she never writes anything that doesn't matter. If it's in there, it matters for some reason or another. She also is able to talk about these kind of really big picture, these big heavy issues and social discussions, but she peppers that in with humor, with pop culture, and with these super relatable characters in a way that makes it accessible, I think, to the general public. With a couple of exceptions, her writing style is incredibly relatable. I will say, if I were to give her any kind of criticism for her writing style or for this book in general, it would also be, it's a positive and a negative, because the way she writes is so intricately woven and detailed that it's not going to be for every single reader. It's not a book, and her books in general are not books that you can just sit down and kind of half pay attention to. And like when you go to read a romance and you just kind of like, you don't really have to like think too much about it. You're just there for the fun. You can pop in and out and whatever. Her books are not like that. They are thought-provoking, and they have depth to them. You have to pay attention. You have to pay attention. You cannot graze through this. You cannot speed read this. You have to pay attention. Otherwise, it's not going to be as gratifying for you. So it's a positive and a negative, but I think they wouldn't be so good without that, and I would not want her to change that at all. But that's my only criticism, is if you're gonna go into this, just go all in. Do not go in half-assed. Okay, her characters. Let's talk about her characters real quick. So the way she writes characters, I think it's comparable to Karen Slaughter. And the way that she writes female characters in particular, she's able to make them so beautifully flawed that you cannot help but to fall in love with them, to root for them, to be afraid for them. And it just takes it off the page and makes them so real. And you feel that way for these main characters, for Jack and for Flo. You feel that for both of them. You really just root for them this whole time, and you never want to give up on them. But they're not perfect, because no one's perfect. They're human. She writes humans, is what she does. But she also does this with her villains, which I think is amazing and interesting at the same time, because some people don't do that. She will take a monster and make it a human, if that makes any sense. Her motivations for her characters are so incredibly well thought out, and they make so much sense that you almost relate. It's not like you do relate on like just a level of being a person, but you can see how they've made the choices to get where they are and why they have made those choices based on the circumstances that they're in. She's able to kind of play with this concept of good versus evil and make you think about Is there a good and evil? Or is it this wavering spectrum of all the in-betweens? Is there good people and bad people, or are we all just people making different decisions that take us up and down along this spectrum at different points in our lives? And at what point is there no turning back from there? For me, it's really interesting to think about these things because I don't personally believe in evil, but I do believe that it's a very fine line separating a good person and a bad person, I guess. It's a very fine line of choices. It's all choices that we make. We're all capable of being here and being here. We're capable. This is humanity. We decide where we fall. And that's even a deeper subject than that, because then you can go into nature versus nurture and all of that kind of stuff. I don't have time for that right now. But anyway, I think it's incredibly interesting, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. Okay, so the pacing of this book, let's talk about, I think was exceptionally fast-paced. This book is genre-bending in a really excellent way because it has the pace of a thriller, but it also has the atmosphere of a mystery or suspense. And then it also has that little pop of horror or paranormal to it. So you have all of these different genres that are kind of packed into this one book, and it's brilliant. It's really brilliant, and that's got to be incredibly difficult to do. I don't know how she does it. There were, there's a little part during the exposition that I felt was slightly slower, but at this point you're kind of getting the world building. And we usually talk about world building, in my experience anyway, when we're discussing fantasy. But I think it applies here too, because if you have any kind of novel that's more atmospheric, it takes a while to set that up, to give you all of the details of the past in order to help you understand the context of what's happening in the current timeline, the consequences that the characters' behavior and actions are going to cause based on what happened in the past. So yeah, there is a little bit of a slower start, but once it starts going, it's like, a rolling stone. It just collects that moss, baby. Okay, so excellent pacing. I adored it. I would compare the atmosphere of this book to a Ruth Ware, if you like Ruth Ware, but I would say it's faster paced than a Ruth Ware, which I don't know how you even do that. You would think that it would be either fast paced or atmospheric, but it's not. It's both. It's absolutely both. Was she successful in the things that she set out and intended to do? I think she absolutely was, in my opinion. I think she does a great job of talking about these true events that have happened and making it relevant to us nowadays, putting in a fictional story to talk about real life things. It was captivating the entire way through. It was smartly written, and the twists, you guys, the twists. Oh my God, there's twists. There are so many in this book that I think that's what makes it a page turner. Is it just like you learn one thing and you're like, okay, what the hell is happening? And then you just have to keep going and going and going. Now the final twist. Okay, this is one of these books where it's like the last couple of pages and you're like, you read that line and you're like, wait. What? And it just blew my mind. And so it's one of those books where you get there, you get to that point, and you just want to start from the beginning and read the book entirely from the beginning from a completely different perspective, because your mind is blown. So just for that, like, I am constantly searching for that high, and I got that in this book. So if you're constantly searching for that high as well, highly recommend this. I want to talk about a few books that are not like this book, but that have similar parallels in one way or another, that I think if you liked this about that book, you will like this book. Okay, so the first book I want to talk about is I'm Thinking About Ending Things by Ian Reid. And I'm recommending that for that exact same reason that I was just talking about, is that blowing your mind the very last time makes you want to flip it over, start at the beginning. If you liked that about I'm Thinking of Ending Things, you're gonna like it in this book too. Granted, they're very different. I'm Thinking of Ending Things is much shorter, very different themes, but that kind of shocking reveal, you're gonna get it in this book. So if you like that, you might like this. Local Woman Missing by Mary Kubica. If you liked that book, I think you might like this book as well. Again, very different books in content, but the way that that book is written, in fact, I have it. Let me grab it real quick. Okay, so the way this book is written, it's also written from multiple timelines and multiple POVs. It's done really well in a way that I think successfully throws you off from what's happening without taking away from the narrative of the story. And so if you like this book, and it's also this one's also very fast-paced. If you like this book, try The Burning Girls. And then another one is It by Stephen King. And this one's a little bit of a looser comparison, because if I were to compare one of C.J. Tudor's books to it would absolutely be The Chalk Man. The Chalk Man has much closer similarities than this book does, but I think her writing style in general is very much influenced by Stephen King. There are so many pop culture references and horror culture references, not just pop culture, but horror culture references. I think she even references Stephen King in this book as well, in here, that are so much fun and makes it just that much more relatable. So I think if you're a fan of Stephen King, I think you will like C.J. Tudor. And I know that she is a fan of his as well. So you can see that influence there. I think she's better than Stephen King though, just my opinion. Don't hate me. Oh, I can see the subs leaving right now. Okay, and then lastly, this one's really a stretch, but actually I also own this one. But I also want to compare it to his Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. The Golden Compass in particular. But obviously this is middle grade YA fantasy, and so you're like, how is this comparable to this thriller, horror, paranormal book that we're talking about? Well, I'll tell you how. Basically the underlying questioning religion, not necessarily religion, because I don't think The Burning Girls takes a stance necessarily on this idea of religion like his Dark Materials does and Philip Pullman does, but it's that idea of questioning authority and questioning religious, not necessarily religious beliefs, but the people who have those religious beliefs. This book does a really good job of not judging. It's not judgmental. It's not proselytizing. It is just making you think. It's just thought-provoking. And I think The Golden Compass does that in a really inspiring way as well. So that's why I would compare those two. Anyway, so I'm going to shut up about that now and stop giving you ludicrous comparisons. They're not ludicrous. They have reasons, but let's talk about Colleen's questions that she asked. Where are they? Her first question says, did you like the main character, Jack? Did you relate to her at all, or did you find her difficult to connect with and, like me, found yourself more connected to Flo and the general mystery and gossip? Flo would be her daughter, and Jack is our protagonist. I did relate to Jack. I really related to Jack, probably more so than Flo, actually. Mostly because I have so much respect for her being a female in this male-dominated position. And some of you may or may not know that I have recently resigned as a mail carrier. And while there actually are quite a few female mail carriers, it's definitely a labor-intensive job. And I felt while I was doing it that I had to keep up with these guys in a physical labor type sense. And so in that respect, I felt like an underdog a lot of the time. And like I had to be better. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that, but as a female in a male-dominated space, I absolutely respect and kind of relate to that. Also, as a mother, I relate to that. I'm a stepmom. I understand her motivations in that sense, where she wouldn't do anything to protect her daughter, the things she does to keep her safe and the worry that she has for her. I understand that. Moving on, number 2. Trying to keep this relatively quick, but I feel like I keep getting caught up in my own conversations with myself. How do you feel about the way the book addresses religion and utilizes it to build the main character and the atmosphere of the village of Chapel Croft? What are some things you liked and anything that you didn't like? Okay, so the way that this book addresses religion is probably one of my favorite aspects of this book, actually. It's a very smart and relatable way, and it does it without judgment, which I could go into some things, but I would be a hypocrite based on what I'm talking about right now. For the record, I think everyone should believe whatever makes them happy. And I'm just gonna leave it at that. You should believe whatever makes you happy, whatever makes your life better. And I honestly, truly believe that. But there are some things that were brought up in this book about the discussion of faith. And what that means for each individual person and how that's different for each individual person. There is a part of this book where they talk about the exorcism. There's a few different parts where they talk about exorcisms, but one in particular where they discuss back in the day, back in like medieval times, they would use this sometimes not because they thought the person needed to be exorcised, but because they wanted to subvert that. Most of the time, the person being exorcised was a woman, and the person doing the exorcising, the priest, was a man. So they would use this as a way to control and a way to silence these women. I thought it was a really great way to talk about how this is not a judgment on the religion, but on the way some people use the religion. And this could be the same conversation about so many different things, about politics, about race, about what have you. The Bible, for instance. There is nothing wrong with the Bible. It is a book, but some people in power will use the book in order to silence other people, in order to keep that power. In order to keep that power, they need to use that to make others powerless. And so in that instance, it's not the Bible's fault. It's the man, it's the person, the human that is using it for that purpose. So this is another way that we can think about the difference between good and evil and that kind of aspect without actually directly relating it to religion. So in that way, I think it's just really cool the way that this book was able to use religion to have discussions about these. I also think the way atmospherically that this kind of affects our experience as a reader is really cool, because some of the things are questionable as to whether or not this is an actual spirit, a ghost, or is this psychological or some other kind of aspect of spirituality? And what are we actually seeing? And it kind of makes the atmosphere of this book more ominous. It gives me kind of like that like Sleepy Hollow type vibe. Think naked trees in a forest with fog. Kind of that creepy chill factor between like spirits and psychological factors, I guess. Does that make sense? I don't know. But anyway, that's my answer. Number 3, who is your favorite secondary character and why? And she says that hers was the funny reporter lady. The one who was like, yeah, people just assume you're crazy and dumb when you're old, but who very much had her finger on the pulse. And I have to agree with you there, Colleen. I forget her name too, but there was this older character and she used to be a reporter, but she was kind of giving Jack the like inside scoop, but nobody really took her seriously because she was a little bit eccentric and a little bit older, and they just kind of brushed her off, as unfortunately tends to happen to a lot of older generations. But Jack listened. Jack listened to her and she got some insight there. But she was definitely a funny character and I liked her as well. I do think that most of these characters were incredibly unlikable, aside from like her, Flo, and Jack. There weren't really too many people in this book that you actually liked, or that I actually liked anyway. So I have to agree with that. I would say if it's an option, I would answer Flo as well, but I would consider her more of a main character. But I loved their relationship between mother and daughter and how, again, it was imperfect, but in like this beautiful, true way without being hopeless. Their relationship was, it just felt real. It felt real. They felt like real people, like real characters. And so I did love both of them. And that's it. Overall, I think this book was great. I think you guys should read it if you're interested at all. If you're still here, go ahead and pick this book up. If you have read it, let me know what you thought of it. Other than that, that's gonna be it for me today. I appreciate you so much. If you did enjoy this and you're not subscribed, I would very much appreciate it if you did. It helps me out an awful lot. And that's gonna be it today. Don't forget that life is short, so read Riley, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.